Greetings hobbyists, this is Artisans of Wool. And in this video we're looking at how we can create a VDM of stitching and set it up as a brush. So there's quite a lot of skills that might be useful for different reasons for this, so I'm going to divide this video into sections. We're going to start with creating a VDM, which might be useful for creating any sort of brush. We're going to specifically deal with some stitching, and then we're going to set that up as a brush that's going to work for our purposes. Along the way, I'm going to talk through some issues and some problems as we do this, because there are a few that we need to overcome. They're not major ones, but they're worth noting down. And hopefully this will cover everything that you need. So let's start off. We're going to go to Edit, Preferences, and we're going to come to Get Extensions, and we're going to type in VDM. And you're going to get this VDM Brush Baker. There's going to be an Install button here that you're going to need to click, and then once you're done, you just save your preferences. Once you've done that, when you hit N, in your tools, let's get rid of our active tool and our options, you're going to have this option for a VDM Brush Baker, and that's going to do pretty much everything for you. Now you've got these settings, I'm just going to leave everything as it is. I don't need any more detail than this, but if you do need more detail, you can up this render sampling to a higher number. So let's click Create Sculpting Plane, and we've got our sculpting plane ready to start, and this is very specifically a set size. It is effectively 2 units by 2 units, and that's really important for this. So let's just tab and go into sculpt mode. I've got Mesh Machine, but if you want to do that up here, you can do, and we're going to start setting this up so that everything is really nice and centralized. Now with that in mind, you might want to, depending on what you're sculpting, before you go into sculpting mode, Shift A and bring in something like an empty, and I'm just going to bring in a plane axis, and you'll notice this is actually in 3-dimension this, but what's nice about that is it's going to divide our plane into quarters, which makes everything easy to deal with, and we can easily find a center. So let's go back into sculpting mode, and then we'll start dealing with this. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we don't impact any of the edges. These edges are really important, they're perfectly flat, so I'm just going to put my mouse as dead center as I can. This is where this empty really helps. Press Shift and A and start dragging, and this is going to create this circle of mask, and I'm going to bring that close to the edge but not quite there. Click, and this at the moment is masking the center but not the outside. We need this the other way around, so I'm going to Control and I to invert this. Now this can create a really hard edge where this mask is hitting, and I don't really like that. I want it being a bit softer than that, just in case I get something up to the edge. So I'm going to go to Mask, and I'm going to go to Smooth Mask. I'm going to put those iterations up to 100, which is about as high as it will go. And you can see that's smoothed out the outside. I'm just going to press Shift and R a couple of times to keep that smoothing, and that's going to look a little bit better. Next, you're going to need to decide how much detailing you need on this. Now that is controlled by your multi-resolution modifier. At the moment I've got this sculpt at 2. I'm going to up it to 3 by clicking Subdivide, and that should work for this. But again, base that on how much detail you need this to have. This might be slightly overkill. Now yours might look slightly different to this. That's only because I've got an add-on called Modifier List, which is really cool. I've got a video on it here if you want to check that out, but you're still going to have a Subdivide button, so that would be fine for you. Next, we're going to make our stitching. Now how you decide to do this is up to you, or whatever you want to sculpt on here is up to you. I want a stitch, and I'm going to try and make this as perfect in inverted commas as possible. So I'm going to go to my draw brush. I want it about that wide, will probably work for a stitch. Let's do a little bit wider. Yeah, probably something like that. No, maybe a little bit thinner again. So just I'm using F to change the size of this. And to make this perfectly straight without some wobble, I'm going to change my stroke from space to curve. And then all I need to do is hold Control, and then oddly you right click where you want it. So I'm going to right click there, and then right click somewhere about the same distance away. So there, you could put more empties in if you really wanted to get this perfect. So I'm going to go about there. Now what this will do is sculpt on this line. So all I do is hit Enter, and then I'll probably hit Enter again. And let's have a look at this. No, probably need it a little bit more. So Enter again. That's probably about right. Let's try once more. Actually, let's stick with that. No, that's a bit too spiky. Let's go one less. There we go. I think I'm happy with this. Now, I want to then make the edging around here so it looks like it's cutting into this a bit. I'm going to use the Draw Sharp brush. Let's once again go into the above view. And I'm just going to do, no, that's probably a bit too sharp. Let's just F to do that. Something about there. Roughly draw around, and I'm just going to hold down Shift and just smooth that out a little bit so it's a bit nicer. Then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So somewhere around, no, that's a bit rubbish, somewhere around there. And I'm doing this quite intentionally without a sculpting tablet. So I'm making a couple of errors just because it's a little bit harder, but I just want to sort of prove you don't need a sculpting tablet to do this, that if you do want one, it is going to help out slightly. So there we go. That is our stitch at this point. I'm pretty happy with that. That will do quite nicely. Now I'm going to go to mask and I'm going to clear the mask, and then I'm going to hide this empty, and I'm going to be really lazy here, and I'm just going to use any form of screen grab that I can get. Now in Windows, that's the snipping tool. Let's just click new, and I'm just going to screen grab something like that. I'm not going to bother rendering this, but I do want an image to show what my brush is. And yeah, I really am being that lazy because this shows exactly what I need, so why would I do any more? Let's just get rid of that for now. I know where that saves, and importantly, we're going to come back to our tool. Let's just go back here, and we need to render and create our VDM. We need to give this a name. I'm going to call this Stitch Test, but you call this whatever you want, and click Render and Create VDM. Now, you're going to get an error. I don't know if this is something I've got set up wrong, but basically this is being set as read-only, so this causes some slight issues, but we still do have this stitch test here, and I can just quite happily use that and make some stitches. So really cool. But there's a problem with that, and that is that this won't save as an asset. It doesn't let me, whereas these it will. So what we're going to do is kind of ignore that, unless you only want to use this in this file. I don't. I want this as an asset. I want to be able to use it again and again. That's how I've got these set up as stitching here. So what I'm going to do is set up a new brush. I'm going to come to draw, and I'm just going to duplicate this asset, and I'm going to call this Stitch Test, and I'm going to capitalize all the tests just to make it easier to see. I'll go to library and say where I want this. I want this as an asset, and then click save. And then I've got this now, Stitch Test, which annoyingly is just where my screencast keys are, so I'll just move that up. So we're going to set this up as a VDM here. Now I've gone through this before in a video, I'll link that in the description as well, but this is very easy to do. All I do is come to this brush, let's come to our tools up here, which has our brush information, and we're going to start fiddling around with this. Now what I need to do to this is add a texture, so come down to where it says texture, click new, and then we can either click here or go to this texture in the texture tab. I'm going to open this, and in your documents you're going to have a file that's called output VDM. Click on that and you've got your EXR, which is your VDM. Click open image, and that's your VDM sorted. Now if we want a preview image, this is going to get annoying again. Don't know why this does this, but we're going to right click and we're going to go to edit preview image, and I'm going to find wherever I've got that screenshot that I took saved. If you want to be able to see everything that's in here, just click that and you get your image, so you can check it's the right one. Click load preview image, and now if I go to tool and then brush asset, then you can see you've got that image. Annoyingly, it doesn't show up here until you save, close and open it again, which is really stupid. You can see it's up there as well, so it is working, but just if this doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. Now anytime you've got changes to this, do right click and make sure you click save changes to asset, so it changes the settings that you've put in here. Now at the moment we've got our stroke set to curve. We don't want that, we want it to space. That means it's going to draw things in a line. So if I just start doing this here, okay, it's sort of doing that, but it doesn't even look like it's doing it right. There's a reason for that. Firstly, we want to take off our strength pressure, unless you really want that, but I would advise against it. Then we want to put 1 to have our strength, and you can see this sort of doing a line, but it's not quite working because we haven't set the texture to a vector displace. And if I do that, then this will suddenly start working. But this looks like a mess because everything's going on top of each other. So let's come back to our stroke as space, and we need to up our spacing. Let's go to about 74. There we go. You can see here now we're just drawing these in as we move along. So that's working. Now what we want to do, or what I like to do, is stabilize my stroke. I'm going to bring my factor down to somewhere a bit lower, and what this will do is it just means that I can draw a line. If we go here, and it stabilizes the direction of my stroke, which is really good. Let's bring down the radius as well. There we go. So that's looking about right. Now the thing that's controlling the gap is the spacing. So if you want it tighter, you can get everything closer together, or further apart, you can have it further apart. So it depends on how far apart you want everything to be. But you'll notice, big issue is that at the moment, whatever direction I go in, my stitching is in the same direction. We solve that in the texture, and we change this to rake. And that means that whatever direction we're going, it's going to do it in that direction. Let's massively down that. I don't know, let's see there. Does that work? Yeah. Nope, that's too small. So it's all a bit of playing around. That looks good. Next, we want this to look a little bit better, and that's controlled by our fall off. We don't want this to be smooth, we want it to be constant, and you'll suddenly notice this starts looking a lot better. And then finally, I want to deal with, which is probably the biggest issue, which is if I zoom in and do my stitching there, and then come out and do my stitching there, it's a totally different size. That's a really big problem. Now, again, there is a slight limitation with Blender. Let's just right click and save our changes to our asset so that all of this information in our brush is saved. But if we come to brush and we change this to scene, now the radius unit will not be based on my view. It won't be based on how zoomed in or out I am. It will just do it that size, and then I can change my radius over here to something that's a little bit more appropriate. Do I want this smaller? Let's go to there. Yeah, that's the size I want my stitching. What's great about this is now I can zoom out and it does it the same size, or zoom in and it does it the same size. So by changing this brush to scene and then our radius there, that gets that sorted. Now, annoyingly, sometimes when I save changes to asset, this doesn't actually get saved as this scene setting. So this is the one thing you might have to come back and fiddle with. And again, I don't know why that is. At this point, I'm going to come to my stitch test and delete that one because I don't want that. It hasn't worked very well, so I'll click delete. And then we've got this here ready to go. And again, once you close this and come back into it, this will have the proper preview image. Now you can also set up an area for this to be saved. So I've got my 3 actual ones that I've done. So I've made a single stitch and then I've used that to create a double stitch and then a cross stitch. You can set that up and have it in its own specific place. I'm not going to cover that here because this video is quite long enough as it is, but the video that's linked in the description covers how to do that and set that up, and it's not particularly difficult to do. Anyway, hopefully that's useful for you. If you want any of these brushes and you can't bother to make them yourselves, they're going to be available on the Patreon. So if you're interested in supporting the channel and getting these brushes, head over to there, and again, the link is in the description. Hope to see you in the next video, and have a great day.